Wonderful. Okay, so the first question was then that your main position is Deputy Director then of the National Institute for Science Communication in Germany. What does the role involve?
What do I do here, you mean?
Yes.
Well, so the bread and butter work of NAVIC, so of the National Institute for Science Communication, is to train scientists to communicate better. So our mission is to focus on scientists and to provide training, any kind of help they really need to be able to communicate themselves. So I give a lot of workshops, meaning I travel around, mostly within Germany, and give training groups, 12 scientists, usually 12 people, on different topics, ranging from social media to the basics of science communication, scientific writing. So I cover quite a range of topics here. I also am managing our e-learning platform. So we have an e-learning project where we again want to make it accessible for scientists to communicate better. And then it's, I'm just involved in a lot of the other sort of initiatives and things that we do, go to conferences, give talks, give presentations, and so sort of my current role.
And you got into this role via science communication itself.
I did, yeah.
How did you transition from the lab into science communication?
So that's a really long and windy story. So when I was a postdoc and I did my postdoc in Spain, somehow I tried to stay in contact with Germany somehow. So I obviously read German news. I was annoyed by how stem cell research was portrayed on German news media. That was 2008. And so I started writing a blog back then, just as an outlet in a way to, being a scientist, opinionated scientist. I, had opinions on this topic based on scientific evidence, and I just needed an outlet to communicate it. So I started writing a blog, and that was fairly early days of blogging. So I was recruited pretty fast to the Science Blogs network.
Okay.
So I have ever since then I write a blog there. It's not very active these days, but that was sort of my first steps into science communication, writing a blog. I also had a Twitter account then, but back then I was still very much focused on my academic career, and I published quite well actually during my postdoc. So my plan really was to pursue an academic career, but it just didn't happen. So for group leader positions, I knew that my next step would be a PI position, and it didn't work out in the way I wanted, meaning I got some senior postdoc offers, but not the independent position I liked. So I kind of said, look, if after 10 years of science, meaning my PhD and my postdoc, and if now I can't do this next step comfortably, then maybe this is not the environment for me to be in. And in a way, so because I had started communicating science and I had started my blog, I somehow got my feet wet a little bit already in the topic, and I thought, all right, so what am I going to do now? Like where will I move now? And so the theme science communication was sort of clear.
Yeah.
I had in the last year of my postdoc, I won an idea competition for a business idea. The idea was for a software startup. It kind of works like Tinder for scientists, but instead of swiping people, you would swipe papers. So scientists would register and upload 2 or 3 relevant papers, and we would then basically match those to PubMed, to new papers from PubMed, and basically give you on your mobile device new and relevant papers on a daily basis, and you could again swipe relevant, irrelevant. This would in turn influence the search algorithm. And I got some startup funds for this immediately after my postdoc, and that project ran for a year, and then I ran out of funds. So I was in Spain, and it was not easy to obtain funds, and also I don't have a business background, so I I maybe sort of focused too much on the actual project and not on the business side of things. And so then I said, okay, fine. You know, it was a nice lesson. I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed being sort of independent, freelance. So I set out to create an agency for science communication, and the niche was European projects. So I was working on European projects during my postdoc and my PhD, and I was aware that those projects needed a part on dissemination and outreach. And the business idea was to provide these services to international collaborations of researchers, meaning ideally be involved in a project planning phase. We would provide a communication strategy for the projects and then implement those projects by, from making the website to organizing outreach events, maintaining social media channels, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So we had this agency was up and running. I underestimated how low the acceptance rate of projects are on the so it didn't really take off. And so in 2015, I moved back to Germany for private reasons, meaning my mother had pancreatic cancer and I went home and took care of her. And during that time, I contacted here the National Institute for Science Communication and wanted to know if they needed someone to work with them. And they said yes, they were interested in having me as an employee. It was a coincidence that my current boss and the person who hired me here, Beatrice, she actually also recruited me to science blogs 10 years ago. So I was head of science blogs when I got my blog on science blogs, and he was and is the director of the National Institute for Science Communication, and she hired me here then.
Yeah, so it was, I guess, a story of initially creating your own position, but also then of having this network that helped you get the longer term one. Yeah,
it's interesting because everybody always emphasizes how important it is to have a network and network, and I always found it difficult to do that in science. So I'm not the person that walks up to everyone at a conference and then just starts talking to them, but somehow here in the science communication world, I could rely on this network, and it just grew naturally because I had this hobby and I obviously passion was involved in communication, and so that's how it started.
Yeah, I guess, that's often the way that when you follow your passion, like a network naturally forms around that because you have the thing in connection. But
I recently read a book from Peter Thiel. I don't know if you know who that is.
The PayPal guy.
Exactly. He founded PayPal, also a big investor in Facebook.
Yeah.
And he wrote a book called From Zero to One. And in this From Zero to One, he describes the difference between monopoly and perfect competition. So he talks about companies that have monopolies, such as Google in search. And they try to talk themselves out of this monopoly by saying, we actually don't have a monopoly, but we're just one player in the advertising market because they're not regulated. On the other spectrum, you have perfect competition. So, for example, say kebab shops in Heidelberg. There's dozens of them, and they're all the same essentially. But they all try, we have this special bread, or we have these special ingredients, or our kebab comes from a special background. So they try to, talk themselves also out of this perfect competition situation to have a unique selling proposition somehow. And so when you map this example on science, you can see that being a postdoc, essentially you're in this perfect competition situation.
Yeah.
Essentially there's hundreds and hundreds of us, and we're doing very similar work, but all of us sort of think, but I have this special project and I work on that sort of emerging field, and a certain little niche here, but essentially we're all doing the same. So how to get from this perfect competition situation over to say a kind of monopoly, And I have the feeling that I somehow managed this. So there's not many scientists who have, I mean, I did 10 years of science, 4 years PhD, 6 years of postdoc. There's not many people with such a strong scientific background that are in communication, that do science communication. And that somehow, makes me not, if not unique, then at least, a rare bird somehow. And I think that also helped.
Yeah. Nice. So maybe, I guess that leads quite nicely into the next question of kind of, in your experience, having worked so long in science at the lab, what do you think the main differences are between kind of working in a more science communication role and working in the lab?
Well, I mean, obviously I don't have pipettes here around me, so that's one main difference. But what I, when I transitioned out of academia, I actually had some career coaching, and that really helped me with that step. And what became clear during that coaching was if I focused on my values.
Yeah.
So what is actually, why am I actually doing what I'm doing? If I identified those and focused on those values, I could just take those values with me, find any other position I liked where I could implement those values.
Yeah.
And that resonated really strongly with me. So I identified that I'm an independent thinker. I like to have ideas and I like to be able to implement them. And I like communication. I enjoyed writing papers and giving presentations always. And so these kind of ideas this is what drove me in science, or what sort of defined my role in science. And I could just take them with me, and be it whether it is having a software startup or an agency for science communication, or now working at the National Institute of Science Communication, I have those same values that I pursue, meaning I have ideas and I can implement them. I can communicate, and I can interact with people, and so it's really for me, it doesn't really feel that much different.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a different type of job.
So what you're doing is different, but the values are the same.
Yeah. And sort of as you may call it, a side effect, or maybe even the most important aspect of this value-based decision-making approach, is that when I first decided to quit academia, I really felt like I failed. So I felt that I failed sort of my dream, that I've not necessarily the people around me, but I failed myself in a way. But now having these sort of mental construct of my values and being able to take them with me, that helped me to be proactive and don't see myself as a failure, but rather as somebody who's actively taking career decisions and taking choices. And that was really empowering in that time when I transitioned out of academia.
Nice. Yeah, I think this is something a lot of people struggle with, but then everyone seems happy in the end. So it's
yeah. Hardly have anyone coming back to academia once they leave.
Yeah. So when you think about your work now, what do you think is the biggest challenge? So that could be intellectual, it could be,
So I mean, it's a very challenging field that I work in. Science communication is not firmly established really as something that has to be done.
Yeah.
What is missing is an incentive structure for scientists. So I'm aware of many researchers and scientists who who enjoy communicating, who like to do that, who would love to do more, but they are aware that this costs time and resources, and is not and this investment is not. The biggest challenge I find is not really to convince other scientists that it is important to communicate. They know that, and they also have good ideas about how to do it, be it on Twitter or in outreach events, interacting with people. They want to do that. They know reasons why, but it is just not established as something that contributes to their success really. And I think that's the biggest challenge that I see where I want to work on too.
And on the flip side, the best part, the thing you enjoy most or get most satisfaction from?
So it's kind of like a side product of this whole of this transition out of academia. I started giving workshops in 2013. So I give workshops on different topics. I started working for a company called HFP Consulting. They work for EMBL, doing those leadership courses. I started with them, and I then developed my own career development workshop for scientists. I do grant writing workshops, and here at NAVIC, I give workshops on all kinds of communication topics. So actually giving those workshops is really something that is something that I love, and I love to go to a place and be there for 2 days with 12 scientists and work on certain topics. That's very, very rewarding, and that really is the best part of my job, I would say.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you're pretty unique in science communication, having such an in-depth science background. Do you think that helps you, and do you feel like you're still using that?
So it definitely helps me. And for, depending on the kind of workshops I give, it helps me to different degrees. For example, when I give career development workshops, it just helps a lot because I'm authentically speaking about myself when I tell my story, and I can really relate to everybody who sort of thinks about careers, and be it within or without academia. It's something that is where I thought a lot about, and where I have a lot of background. So that's clear. I think in German there's a term called Stallgeruch. So it means the smell of the stable. So when I come, I have this smell, if you may, on me as being a scientist. So if I stand in front of a group of 12 scientists and I'm giving my workshops with them, I still see myself as one of them, and I think they perceive me as being one of them because I understand the culture, I understand how science works, and I'm not there to prove them anything or to show them, some special things, but I'm there to work with them. And I think that, so it really helps me with all kinds of workshops that I give. The strongest effect is probably with the career development.
Yeah. So do you then still feel connected to science?
Yeah, sure. A lot. I mean, I'm in science communication, so I get to hear lots of projects. I hear what many researchers in many different fields are doing, what they're working on, what their challenges are, and in a way, I have a much broader view now of what science actually is to what I had before. I mean, it goes far beyond my little niche, which was systems biology in the end, but now it's far bigger and bigger, and not only natural sciences, all kinds of sciences, and also it's a bit of I don't know if science policy is the right word, but it's sort of this institutional administrative level of science is also something that I get to know. So how is it organized? How do institutions think, scientific institutions? How do they plan and the future? And that's a very interesting angle to look at things.
Yeah, true. And what skills, experience, and character traits, other than having a scientific background, and I guess for this, definitely communication, do you think are important?
I mean, science communication is really an umbrella term, and many people work in the field that have many different types of backgrounds. So there's journalists, there are professional communicators, there are people that come from the media world, and there are scientists like me. I mean, it helps to be able to write, and I practiced writing my blog. I'm by no means a great writer or a trained writer, but it helps writing and knowing how to write, and obviously sort of being open to other people. Being, I'm interested in people. I'm interested in knowing about what other people do, and this interest is something that it's a natural curiosity that sort of really helps me. And it's an evolving field, so it's changing a lot, and sort of being also able to respond to changes. In I think every scientist you would ask will tell you that not a single day is the same as the day before, and it's the same now in my current job. It's never routine. It's always new. Every day is different. So in a way, most of the skills that I sort of used during my academic career are still pretty much being used now.
Good. Then I guess going back to this kind of idea of the postdocs being one group who have to differentiate themselves for careers. If people are interested in science communication training, this kinds of roles you've had, what advice would you give them?
I get this asked actually quite a lot, and so people ask me what should they study, or should they do like an internship at some institution or some magazine or news outlet, and so I mean, my own experience is that it really worked by just doing it. So just starting, and it's never been easier to start communicating. I mean, you can create a Twitter account within a couple of minutes. You can set up your own blog in half an hour and just start writing away. You can get involved in outreach events at your host institutions. I don't think you need to sort of have formal training in this, particularly with a scientific background. So there's no need to sort of study an additional degree or anything, but it really, just get your feet wet, just start communicating and see what you like, try out different media, whether it's, could be my podcasts have a revival now. So if you have a nice voice, why not try a podcast? Interview formats work well, video, or, writing, social media. And again, define your, so choose your media, try out different media, define your target audiences. So see who do you actually want to talk with. Do you want to, work with school kids? Then maybe getting involved in local outreach events is the way to go. Do you want to talk to other scientists who are not in your field? Then you got to adjust the messages in a way so that it resonates with the target audiences you're thinking about. But I think just trying out, just doing it is the best way to go. Often social media or blogs allow you to start also anonymously, so you can just start without giving away your real name, see what it feels like, and then I mean, we had the networking aspect in the beginning, and it's still true also for science communication, especially because it really is a changing field. Go to science communication conferences. For example, next come in April, we here in Karlsruhe, we have a symposium for communicating scientists. So if you are communicating, or if you're interested in communicating science, our symposium here in Karlsruhe is an event to go to. And there's an annual meeting in Germany called Forum Wissenschaftskommunikation. So there are definitely some events. I also know that locally there are some so-called Stammtisch meetings where science communicators get together, talk to communicators at your institutes. So contact communication departments, try to understand what they, what is their work, what they're doing, and it helps to understand sort of, where they come from, meaning, traditionally these are press offices, writing press releases, communicating with journalists, and it more and more morphed now into these fully blown communication departments with, catering to different media channels, to different audiences, organizing outreach events, often involving scientists also in this communication measures, so that, it's become much more transparent to work together with communication staff at the institutes too, and that's a way to go, to just try it out.
Nice, yeah. It's funny you mentioned that it's expanding. I think at EMBL, so I've been here on campus for 8 years now, and I think when I started there was like 4 people in the communication team, and now it's nearly 20. It's amazing.
I see this everywhere. So some are faster, some are slower. EMBL is, as usually, on the faster side. So you see it's also at universities, at other research institutes, that they're just expanding. And So obviously you need funding for that. So sometimes that's an issue, that it's not really clear where to get the funding from. How to also organize this. Sometimes there are these projects that have a sort of funding, dissemination, outreach, engagement parts with it, but it's then not really communicated from the scientists to the communication department. So I think there's quite some loss that could be sort of changed. And what I also see is that maybe in the past, those press offices would hire people who have a media background or who have maybe a background in journalism. But what I see more and more is that scientists with a scientific background are hired. And I think the rationale behind it is, what do you think is easier? Teaching somebody with a media background how all of the science works, or teaching somebody who knows how science works and who's interested in communicating the 101 of communication? And often it's the latter, and that's why I think scientists really have an advantage there. And it's a growing field.
We might have covered this maybe with that already, but are there any misconceptions about the sector that you think come up a lot that people should be aware of?
Well, so there's two answers to this. The first is that as seen from a scientist, somebody who's active in research, the misconception is that this is some kind of a lower job. So this just comes naturally with being on the academic track, with being told of not looking left and right and focusing on your academic career. Even working in a company outside is seen as a lower job, and the same is true for communication. That as seen from somebody who is in research, it's often not being taken seriously. That's one misconception. Another misconception is that so science communication struggles sometimes with the terminology, and is it science PR that we're doing, or is it what is our motivation to do this? And I think it's important to be clear about the actors. And on the one hand, you have journalists who are sort of independent, and they do the critical research, and their role is to be critical. And then you have the science communicators, which in a way do journalistic formats and many different media and roles, but essentially it is you are paid by an institute, so it is some form of PR, science communication. Just as a scientist who is communicating also has an employer, and in a way is not entirely free in what a scientist is allowed to say or communicate about. So I think maybe not a misconception, but just a sort of a lack of knowledge really is there about who are the actors and what are their different roles in communicating science, whether it's journalists, professional communicators, or scientists.
Great. Then I think we're almost done with the questions. So the final two were is there a particular place where science positions are advertised that you?
To be honest, I'm not aware of a single outlet. I think it helps to follow people on Twitter. There's a website for the German market called Wissenschaftskommunikation.de, sciencecommunication.de in German, and this is a fantastic resource. So they have many different formats for science communication on there. They have profiles of people that communicate science, including scientists who are shifted over to science communication. So that could be stop. Then going to those conferences I mentioned, Forum Wissenschaftskommunikation, our symposium in April at NAVIC, and then really just talking to people, talking to communication departments. What I see popping up often is positions for new media, social media, and outreach events. So organizing events and being involved in local outreach and engagement.
Yeah. And I guess the final main question is whether there's anything that surprised you about working in the sector when you came from doing your blogs and then you moved.
Well, so what surprised me about the sector, I think. Well, I think it's what is surprising is coming from academia, in a way you work together with people who all have a very similar background than you have. Everyone is very well trained, very clever, very intelligent, and sort of all sort of thinking along the same lines. Going into communication, you get to meet different people with different backgrounds and different views on life, and so. It wasn't so much a surprise as a welcome sort of change to also meet with different people that see the world through different eyes, that have a background in journalism and look through that lens, or that have a background in corporate communication for many years and see the world through that lens. And so it's it really opened up my perspective. But I think by writing the blog and by sort of getting my feet wet at being involved in science communication and engagement events and initiatives, I sort of got what it was about before I fully transitioned into the field.
Yeah, nice, wonderful. So I think the questions were really clear. I think this will the answers. Sorry, I think this will write up really nicely. Is there anything you think that didn't come up that you want to mention?
I think what's also important is to realize that while you're doing a PhD or a postdoc, you're already acquiring a vast set of skills that you're completely unaware of. And whether it's resilience, logical thinking, communication skills, writing skills, self-management skills, project management, budget management, it's a vast array of skills that you just do.
Yeah.
That are fantastic on any kind of CV. And if you're sort of it really takes an effort to translate what you have done into a language that somebody else will like to see. Yeah. So it doesn't matter where you publish your papers, but it matters what you actually did on this project and how you carried it out, what skills you used. So it really needs a change of perspective to. It's not about quickly assembling a CV and sending it out 100 times, but it takes some time to write a CV that really describes what resonates with a future employer. And I think when people come out of academia and they want to change, it often is that they're frustrated and being sort of half depressed, frustrated scientist with some form of self-deprecating CV is not very helpful. So I really encourage people to take some coaching, take some time also to get back on track and see it as something positive. There's I think she's a philosopher at Rutgers University called Ruth Chang. Mm-hmm. She gave a TED talk also, Ruth Chang with a CHANG.
Yeah.
She does research on decision making, and what she says is that these, when you are at these crossroads of making decisions, it's not a burden, or it shouldn't feel like a burden. It shouldn't feel like something, like stressful or that should cause fear in you. But these are actual opportunities where you are in charge of changing your life. So it's something super positive to say, I can be in charge and really direct myself in the direction I want to go. Because what usually happens is that all the influences around you sort of shape you and push you and form you into a certain channel.
Yeah.
So seeing this as a positive step, a career decision, that is something really for you yourself. I think that mental change is really a good step into doing something else.